Well, the Epstein files are finally released, and I am getting absolutely bombarded with horrific images, with people's hot takes, and it's almost too much to handle. It's wild that we are in a time and space where we all have access to this information if we're willing to look, but B, I can't believe that my eyes can get assaulted with this filthy, vile material. I personally actually don't even know how deep I want to get into this material because it is dark, it is satanic, it is evil, but I want to talk to you guys about something else, the bigger picture. I want to zoom out with you all. I think you guys are going to be very, very interested in this story. Welcome back to the Sovereign Sphere podcast. I'm Carla Treadway. Today, we're going to zoom out, we're going to cut through the noise, and we're going to examine exactly what is going on with the Epstein files, particularly what the media is saying about it. So, this is clearly one of the most explosive document releases in recent memory, maybe in my entire lifetime. But this episode is going to be a little bit different. We're not just looking at who is in these files, we're examining how dramatically different the left wing media and the right wing media are interpreting the exact same evidence. And unfortunately for society, we live in a post brain rot area where people are not listening to material like this. They're not like our audience, and they are just looking at the one little one-liner that Forbes magazine puts out or the New York Times puts out, and no one's actually looking at these documents. What's unique about the Epstein files is I am not telling you to go and look at those documents because I don't know if that is beneficial to our souls. I think that is actually very harmful to our souls and our minds. And personally, I don't want to get desensitized by disgusting, dark material like that. We're going to zoom out today. And for that reason and that reason alone, I want to talk about the story and I want to talk about media. So first, let's establish what we're dealing with. In January of 2026, the Department of Justice released approximately 3.5 million pages of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. Unbelievable that that's the amount of documents. And this reportedly only about half of what exists. These files contain emails, flight logs, FBI interviews, photographs, and court documents spanning decades of Epstein's activities. Now, the crucial context that changes everything is these documents were released because Trump and his allies spent years demanding their release, while the Biden administration and previous administrations intentionally kept them buried. Now, here's where it gets fascinating from a media analysis perspective. The same documents are being used by different outlets to paint completely different pictures of guilt, innocent, and conspiracy. Before we dive into the media narratives here, let's examine perhaps the most important piece of evidence in this entire saga. And it's not even in the documents itself. It's about who wanted them released and who wanted them buried. So this timeline is crucial. In 2015, Trump launches his political career by attacking Bill Clinton's Epstein connections, saying Clinton has a lot of problems coming up with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. In 2023 to 2024 campaign season, Trump publicly and repeatedly calls for Epstein files to be released. Elon Musk tweets, part of why Kamala is getting so much support is that if Trump wins, that Epstein client list is going to become public. I hear a lot of people on the left calling Trump and Elon pedos because of Epstein's list. And I ask questions like everyone. But a good question would be, why are these the individuals pushing for the release? Now, Kash Patel repeatedly said on Truth Social, I've been calling for all of it to be released. He didn't, of course, we know that. Trump Jr. becomes one of the most vocal advocates. He said, show us all of the Epstein client lists now. Why would anyone protect these scumbags? And at his Senate confirmation hearing, Kash Patel promised to help secure the release. I don't know what happened there. I don't. Meanwhile, the Biden administration sits on 3.5 million pages for years, and they kept them sealed. Now, after Trump's victory, the files finally get released. So, yeah, again, let's just apply basic logic here. If you're guilty of something, do you demand that the evidence be made public? Do you campaign on transparency about the very documents that would possibly incriminate you? This is perhaps the strongest evidence of Trump's innocence in the entire saga. Guilty people don't typically spend years demanding that prosecutors release the evidence against him. Is he taking other bits of evidence out there? That I don't know. But if you compare this to the Clintons, who fought subpoenas for 6 months and only agreed to testify when facing contempt of Congress charges, somebody looks really, really guilty right now. Okay, let's look at the media and how they're handling it. So the left-wing media, how they initially approach the story, they've had to walk back a lot of their assumptions. So initially, outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and the Washington Post focused heavily on Trump's connections to Epstein, expecting to find very damaging evidence. So they highlighted Trump's documented social relationship with Epstein in the 90s, quotes from Trump calling Epstein a terrific guy, the fact that Epstein recruited from Mar-a-Lago. That does not look good. But then the documents were actually released. CNN and other mainstream outlets had to acknowledge that the documents don't actually show Trump engaging in any criminal activity with Epstein. In fact, the files revealed something that completely contradicted all of their posts and narratives. Epstein and writer Michael Wolff were actually conspiring against Trump to help him lose elections. And as Trump himself pointed out, they found that Jeffrey Epstein and this sleazebag writer named Michael Wolff were conspiring against Donald Trump to lose the election. So right there, you know that I had nothing to do with this guy. This forced a significant pivot in left-wing coverage. So rather than finding the smoking gun that they expected to find against Trump, they had to admit that the document showed Trump's relationship with Epstein had been soured. Epstein was actively working against Trump politically, and there was no evidence of Trump participating in Epstein's criminal activities. Also, the girls from Mar-a-Lago, there was a girl that was recruited, came back to the White House, told them what happened, and apparently Trump said, like, no one is to go to that island anymore. It's a cesspool. There's also old footage of Trump calling that place a cesspool and no one should go there. So the left-wing narrative had no choice but to shift, to focus more on institutional failures and the need for accountability across the board while quietly downplaying their initial Trump-focused approach. It makes me really mad, actually, to see people's social media understanding of this issue. And I see so many posts from left-wing followers saying, like, see, I knew it. I knew Trump was in it. And I'm like, did you even read it? Did you? And again, I'm so conflicted here because I actually don't want anyone looking at that dark material for your souls. It's so bad. But it actually doesn't back Trump into a corner. It actually frees him. But let's look at the right-wing media. What are they doing? So conservative outlets, Fox News, The Daily Wire, and right-wing podcasts took a completely different approach to the same documents. Their focus was laser focused on Democratic figures and Hollywood elites, particularly Bill Clinton's extensive documented relationship, 17 documented visits to the Clinton White House by Epstein's, multiple trips on Epstein's plane with young women, lots of photos, the infamous photo of Clinton in hot tubs with Epstein victims, Clinton's initial refusal to testify before Congress. Clinton's, it doesn't look good. Meanwhile, I also just saw on the news that the Canadian Liberals are bringing on Hillary Clinton to talk to them about how to be a good Democratic Liberal, but that's neither here nor there. I thought we cared about who we associated with. Also, a ton of right-leaning media focusing on Hollywood and tech elites. So Jay-Z is mentioned in the documents with very serious allegations. So I don't know, all the people that are constantly attacking Trump, I really hope to see some anti-Jay-Z, anti-Beyonce posts from you as well, just so you can be consistent. Consistency matters. George Clooney referenced multiple times in suspicious contexts. TMZ founder Harvey Levin described as helping Epstein with PR, gross, and various entertainment industry figures throughout the files. Too many to list, honestly. So the right-wing narrative essentially says this proves the Democratic establishment and Hollywood elites are vile, while Trump was actually fighting against it from the beginning. They pointed to Trump's 2015 comments about Clinton having problems with Epstein's Island as evidence that Trump was trying to expose this network, not participate in it. So we have the left wing narrative, the right wing. Let's just be critical thinkers here. I know my audience is. Let's just look at what the evidence actually shows, because the truth is never, ever black and white, and people get corrupted. And again, guys, I've honestly been struggling with this so much. The material itself, but I guess I never thought that it was possible that so many people could actually do these horrible things. I guess a part of me was hoping it was a conspiracy, and to have proof that it's not is really dark. So again, do not feel the social media pressure to go and look at these things. I do think truth is important, but guys, this is dark stuff. Now, the actual documents reveal, and we have to separate fact from whatever the media spin is, there are documented Trump connections. So he has had a social relationship with him since the 90s. This is confirmed. There's photos and quotes from that era, but also there's evidence of Epstein conspiring against Trump politically. That's not a friend of his. There is no evidence of criminal activity, and Trump was the one demanding that these files be released. There's also lots of documented connections between Ghislaine Maxwell and Mark Carney. Just going to throw that out there for my Canadian friends. Now, the documented Clinton connections, there were a ton of White House visits during the Clinton presidency, multiple flights on Epstein's plane, photos with victims in compromising situations, and initially fought legal subpoenas to avoid testifying. I am so curious what Hillary knows. I think she knows a lot. And then the broader elite network, man, Epstein had his hands in every facet of life: politics, entertainment, academia, international figures. There's like 1,000 references to various Hollywood celebrities, tech industry connections, international political figures. And then there's a lot of speculation. Much of the most salacious content comes from FBI interviews with individuals whose credibility the FBI itself questioned, with notes like, appeared to be emotionally unbalanced and offered no supporting evidence. Well, to be fair, I think anyone that saw that stuff would probably be a wreck. Offered no supporting evidence. I'm sure people weren't in there taking photos. I'm sure phones weren't allowed in these horrible scenarios. So yeah, how they got 3.5 million pieces of evidence already from that, I have no idea. Now, this brings us to what I call the why would they do that test? When analyzing any conspiracy or corruption allegation, you have to ask yourself, why would the allegedly guilty party be the one demanding transparency? So if Trump were compromised by Epstein, why would he start his 2015 campaign by attacking Clinton's Epstein connections? Why would he repeatedly call for the files to be released? Why would his son spend years tweeting demands for transparency? Why would his FBI director promise to release everything? And why would Elon Musk tweet that releasing the files would hurt Democrats? So the behavior doesn't really match the allegation. Guilty people typically try to bury evidence, not publicize it. Now, if the Democrats, if the Clintons were innocent, why would they fight subpoenas for 6 months? Why would they only agree to testify when facing contempt charges? Why not welcome the opportunity to clear their names? So the behavior patterns tell us everything that we need to know about who had something to hide. Now, here's what's really telling about this current media landscape: the complete inconsistency in how evidence is evaluated. So the left-wing outlets initially treated Trump's 1990s social connections as potentially disqualifying, while treating Clinton's more extensive documented relationship as requiring more evidence before drawing conclusions. When the documents didn't support their Trump narrative, they just quietly shifted their focus. Now, right-wing outlets dismiss Trump's connections as social acquaintance, while treating Clinton's as evidence of criminal activity. But in this case, the evidence actually supports their interpretation. The key difference: one side's interpretation was contradicted by the evidence, while the other side's was supported. The bigger picture: this ultimately shouldn't be about partisan politics. The Epstein network appears to have genuinely bipartisan intent. It's corrupt, it spans multiple industries, countries. That man just wanted power. The file suggests Epstein was an influence peddler who cultivated relationships across the political spectrum. He had connections to Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, Americans and foreigners and Canadians. However, the evidence clearly shows that some connections were deeper and more problematic than others. The visual evidence of Clinton with victims, the extensive documented relationship, and the resistance to transparency paint a very different picture than Trump's social acquaintance and demand for transparency. Again, and my Canadian friends, if you got TDS and you've been obsessing about this story and you haven't mentioned Mark Carney picnics with Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend, give your head a little shake. But I don't know. This just reveals a lot about our media. There's initial bias confirmation, so outlets look for evidence to support their predetermined narratives. There's the inability to admit error. So even when the evidence is contradicts your idea, your initial idea, the coverage quietly shifted rather than just publicly acknowledging that you made a mistake. And of course, there's selective application of standards. So different evidentiary standards applied based on the political standards. Who are we looking at? But here's what's encouraging. The truth eventually came out. So documents got to speak for themselves. And we were able to force hostile outlets like CNN to acknowledge reality that contradicted their preferred narratives. Now, the most dramatic development has been Bill and Hillary Clinton's sudden reversal on testifying before Congress. After months of fighting subpoenas and threatening contempt charges, they now agreed to testify. This represents a strange move for the Clintons, who historically never back down from political fights. The fact that they've now agreed to testify suggests that they realized they could win this battle. Congressman Chip Roy said even Democrats on the Oversight Committee were prepared to vote for contempt charges, showing how toxic this issue has become even within their own party. Now, you, the listener, what question should you be asking? Instead of saying, how can we use something like this against our political opponents? We should be asking, why did the justice system fail this badly in 2008? How do we prevent all powerful people from escaping accountability? What does this tell us about the media? How do we ensure nonpartisan investigations going forward? And why did it take a change in administration to release documents that the government had for years? There's also one detail that has been very underreported, and that's the international scope of resignations following these releases. Multiple members of parliament in European countries have resigned their positions after being named in these files. There was also a reporter from CBC in there. This raises the question, why are we just talking about America? Because almost every single country has been mentioned in these documents as well. The Epstein files, they reveal a lot about elite corruption, but they reveal even more about the power of transparency and the importance of demanding it. The people demanding transparency were the ones with nothing to hide, while those resisting it were the ones with everything to lose. This wasn't revealed through partisan investigation or media gotcha journalism because our media is a joke. It was revealed because one side consistently demanded that all the evidence be made public, while the other side fought to keep it buried. The media did not help anyone here. And the truth emerged not despite the political process, but because of it, specifically because of politicians who were willing to demand transparency, even though they didn't know what it would reveal about everyone, including themselves. So when Trump said in 2015 that Clinton had problems with Epstein's Island, he was either incredent in his own innocence. The documents, it was the latter. In files, they remind us that in the information age, the truth has a way of emerging, but only when people are actually brave enough to demand that it be released. The real scandal isn't just what Epstein did, but how long powerful people were able to keep this evidence buried. And it's shocking to me to watch people on social media just take headlines and think that they have an opinion on this now. We have to remember that the goal isn't just to find confirmation for what you already believe, it's to follow the evidence wherever it leads. And in this case, the evidence leads to a relatively simple conclusion that people demanding transparency had nothing to hide, while those fighting it had everything to lose. Keep questioning. Keep demanding transparency. Keep thinking critically. Let's all get out of our own echo chambers and honestly just be just be a truth seeker, be a critical thinker, be a sovereign mind. You can have your political stance, but if we could all just keep zooming out, we're going to actually figure out what's going on in the world around us. I hope you guys like this episode. I hope you like what we're going for here these days, a well-rounded approach to all of these absolutely insane news stories. Really appreciate this audience. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys for another episode here soon.